Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mist is the sequel to Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights, a decently solid Metroidvania I made a video on last year. Ender Magnolia is almost entirely better than its predecessor. This video will more or less serve as a comparison for both games and will serve as an argument on why Ender Magnolia is nearly strictly better as a Metroidvania and as a whole. I recommend watching my Ender Lilies video first, but it's not required by any means. Forgive the shameless plug. Since we're here early in the video, I figured I'd mention the whole like and subscribe button just to enhance the whole shameless plug experience. If you like the video, you may like others on the channel, or videos that I may release in the future. Another quick thing to preface, the story of Ender Lilies provides some context for the sequel, but it's not required. If you do want to try either game out, but would rather just try one, I'd recommend Ender Magnolia over Ender Lilies in almost all cases. Ender Magnolia doesn't suffer from sequelitis problems like relying too much on the original's identity, or just being a less impactful or unnecessary product. The games are similar, but don't have an overwhelming overlap. Some may even still prefer the first game due to its strong art style and thematic elements. Like the original, Ender Magnolia uses a semi-unique mechanic in gaming where the main character doesn't fight on their own and instead uses summons, or in this game's case, homunculi, to fight for them. The main difference between the two games is the summon system. Ender Magnolia's summon system has some upsides and innovations, like all homunculi being unlimited in terms of use, being decently reliable, and having consistent synergy. There's 4 subclasses of summons: primary, cooldown, pressure, and auto. Primary summons provide a consistent burst of damage and act sort of as a main weapon. Cooldown abilities are strong single-hit abilities that go on a relatively short cooldown before you can use them again. Cooldown abilities can be used in tandem with primary abilities for bursting a lot of damage and adding to the enemy's break gauge quickly and reliably. Pressure abilities activate when a button is held down and are constantly active. These can be used while traversing normally, or to, pressure enemies. Auto abilities are relatively the cast and forget type of abilities. You summon them to join you in battle, then can just as easily forget that they're there while they provide some value. Combining different summons can lead to some really strong builds that just melt health bars. In Ender Magnolia, you have 4 slots for abilities, instead of the first game's 3. However, you can't switch between summon combinations in sets mid-combat. This can strip away a lot of variety and can make changing your builds at respite benches more necessary and common. Ender Magnolia has more abilities at the cost of its lacking summon variety. Ender Lilies had 26 unique summons, while Ender Magnolia has 10 different summons with 3 vaguely similar abilities each. I can understand why Ender Magnolia went with a less is more approach with less unique summons and more depth per summon, but I honestly prefer the first game in this regard. It at least doesn't lock out combinations. In Ender Magnolia, you're locked out of putting 1 summon in 2 ability slots, so variety somewhat feels lacking despite the possible number of combinations being over 400,000. If Ender Lilies just had 1 set like Ender Magnolia, the total number of combinations would be 15,600, but since the game does have 2 sets, the combination count goes up to 243 million. If Ender Magnolia had 2 sets of summons, there'd be a lot more than 408,000 combinations at, 166 trillion. Despite the single set number being higher and there being more abilities to use in Ender Magnolia, the limitation feels harsher than it really is. With how abilities are unlocked in the campaign, I found myself wanting to experiment, but not feeling comfortable enough to. Only having 1 set and having to sometimes sacrifice an ability I was confident in. By the time I had 100% of the game, I only really used 15 out of the 30 abilities, down from the first game's 20 out of 26. In the first game, you acquired an ability for defeating a minor or major boss almost 100% of the time. Here that's not the case. Fighting a boss and not being rewarded with a summon is too plentiful and annoying as hell. I found myself constantly disappointed to not have unlocked a new ability directly from finishing a boss battle, whether it was hard fought or not. New ability, please, God, please. I want new I don't want that I've been rocking for the past multiple hours. Because of the variety of the first game, I had the expectation to amass a variety of summons consistently as I progressed, but disappointingly this was not the case. Now I know I just had this long rant about how they ruined summons, but pretty much everything from here on out will be a positive. In general, the gameplay just plays better than the first game. Within the first 30 minutes, you sit down at a bench and the game gives you the option to change your difficulty. While the first game technically had difficulty options, you had to beat the game to unlock them, and all of the modifiers just made the game more difficult, except for the option to remove collision damage. Collision damage is not a thing in Ender Magnolia, and overall I'd argue that the game is easier. And this is coming from the guy who decided to do this and basically play on everything at least 1.5 times harder than base difficulty. The game is substantially easier. Ow! Shit! Game's substantially easier. Makes massive misplay. To a certain extent, the harder modifiers you play on, you will be rewarded with a currency that will unlock various cosmetics and concept arts, which is a way of rewarding hard work. In terms of moment-to-moment gameplay feel, Ender Magnolia feels very fluid, especially with how it handles abilities. The cast time of everything makes sense, the hitboxes make sense, and nothing really feels unfair. Staggering enemies is a lot more fun than in the first game. Ender Magnolia allows you to juggle enemies for a couple of hits before they fall to the ground. Bullying staggered enemies is rewarding and fun, and happens frequently depending on your summons. Also like Ender Lilies, Magnolia has an SP gauge which fills up upon dealing damage, and allows for stronger alternate attacks. Magnolia allows all summons to have an ability for the SP gauge. While Ender Lilies had 8 total SP consuming abilities, Ender Magnolia has 10, 3 of which don't do damage. Instead they provide defensive and offensive buffs, and healing, which are honestly really great. On the note of increasing stats, Ender Magnolia adds in a few more defensive and offensive options. Relics still exist, and can be upgraded using one of the game's currencies to either become a stronger variation, or to consume less space, allowing for better builds. There are some pretty good relics in the game, like a 40% damage increase to auto and pressure attacks, an increase to break damage dealt, defensive options, and ways of getting more loot for more upgrades. Like in Ender Lilies, there's ways to parry attacks. However, having a parry is not linked to a relic slot. Instead, Ender Magnolia gives the player more options by allowing them to equip a carapace for parries, 2 bracelets for general stat boosts, and a totem for an extra bit of value. Totems have a decent bit of variety, like providing health and SP gauge regeneration, as well as extra uses of healing. But there's a clear best in my opinion that does everything I just mentioned. There's no reason to use another totem, as this one gives you 2 SP bars and a full heal and SP gauges when you hit 15% health. Oh, and another use of heal. Just like most Metroidvanias, unlocks are almost exclusively gained through exploring the world. Where there aren't loose items, there are grimoires, which add inventory to shops in the game. Yes, there are shops in Ender Magnolia. There are NPCs, and the world is a bit less drab and gray. Moment-to-moment exploration and movement feels fluid, map navigation is simple and easy, and fast travel is even better in this game, allowing the ability to fast travel to any bench without having to be at a bench. Mapping is also notably improved in Ender Magnolia. I have almost no qualms with the different mapping style in Ender Magnolia. Whenever you enter a new area, your map slowly tracks everything you're seeing for the first time. This time, the map is a default gray with the background of the level, and there's a lot of clarity as the map is actually displayed 1-to-1 as you're roaming. When switching rooms in Ender Lilies, you couldn't tell where exactly the door was, and wherever it would lead would be a bit more vague. There would be no visual way of telling what levers or obstacles were still in the way either. This led to some occasions where I got stuck. Ender Magnolia fixes nearly every problem with navigation, whether I even noticed it. Interactable objects and known loot locations are also tracked on the map, and will appear without needing to access menus. There's still a sense of discovery, and the game doesn't fully tone down exploration in terms of accessibility. The only issue I do have with the new map is that sometimes room transitions can be a bit more subtle. On probably 4 occasions, progression briefly halted for me when I was looking at the map searching for new rooms. Instead of rooms being clearly marked by a red dot like in the first game, rooms are linked adjacently on the map. This is only an issue because rooms are marked as complete before moving through room transitions, which is arguably something that entails a room being incomplete. It's a small gripe that isn't quite justified considering how much more functional the map is in this game. Ender Magnolia made another positive change for navigation in the form of having a map tell you where you need to go in a vague enough way. When you pull up the map, there will be a general "where you need to go next" message that can help you navigate forward. There's even a couple of occasions where a marker shows up. This is rare, but it can be helpful in a pinch. Ender Magnolia also does much better in the world building department. Well, subjectively. There's a lot less text excerpts in the game. There's obviously still logs of text to get a better understanding of the world, but there are NPCs placed throughout the world now, and the world's a lot less doom and gloom than the first game. Just like the original, each environment is distinctive, and this time it's even truer. Instead of most everything being dilapidated, most of the world seems functional. Ender Magnolia is set in a dystopian setting, but after society had some time to recuperate. Nothing's perfect, and people are still fighting for survival. In the two main areas with NPCs, there's some life. It's not thriving by any means, people are just alive and hanging out as set dressing, if we're being honest. The different regions in the game are clear in level design, while also having unique enemies. If you're in the magic school area, you'll know. If you're in the ninja area, you'll know. If you yearn for the mines, you'll know when you're there. Ender Magnolia does a lot better in terms of making its zones distinct with background colors. A majority of Ender Lilies environments stay in my memory as gray, despite a few being colorful like the End area and the Witches region. Magnolia utilizes colored backgrounds really well in my opinion. The game's main color isn't gray like the first game, but instead is a nice cobalty blue, and many areas in the game complement this well. Even areas that are more gray or brown have a decent bit of saturation and are just visually appealing. Each area has a distinct soundtrack that you'll get used to simply by progressing. None of the songs overstay their welcome. The vocals in tracks can be a bit jarring sometimes, but it's not a big deal. The soundtrack fits really well with the game, especially given the tonal shift of the sequel. Ender Magnolia isn't just a sad, solemn, and melancholic game, and the world-building, art direction, and soundtrack shows this. There's still value in Ender Lilies' more solemn setting. I still enjoyed my time with it, and both games stand out on their own, which I love to see from a sequel. Moving on, the story of Ender Magnolia is a lot more original than its counterpart. While Ender Lilies told a story that was a little too easy to compare to Hollow Knight, Ender Magnolia tells a story that is a decent bit more fresh. It's not completely original by any means, but it's original enough not to be a problem. So Ender Magnolia takes place decades after the first game, when life is somewhat brought back to the land. Instead of the world being exclusively in a dark fantasy setting, it's more of a dark steampunk fantasy setting. There's no blight, which has wiped out basically all life, and instead of fighting blighted beings in the first game, you fight homunculi. These are essentially sentient machines. Yes, Ender Magnolia is built in a world where humans and robots coexist, a topic that we all probably know well. Anyway, for the most part, homunculi should just carry out services and be peaceful. But it all goes wrong, and the homunculi start to go corrupt due to pretty much just government greed causing environmental concerns. The main character, Lilac, is an attuner and is able to uncorrupt homunculi, and occasionally these homunculi join her. These are the summons that you use in combat and interact with throughout the game. Lilac begins the game with amnesia, and over time when homunculi are converted to join her cause, she is able to see their memories and over time pieces together her history. When obtaining new homunculi and progressing throughout the game, there are opportunities to sit down on a respite bench and engage in conversation with your homunculi. It's a nice touch that justifies the lower summon count in the game. Instead of nearly all summons lacking personality, Ender Magnolia helps build connections to the creatures fighting for you. After progressing through various points in the game, you learn your purpose in the narrative and how to stop the suffering of the homunculi by pretty much fighting the head honcho in the highest point in the map. The big boss, Gilroy, was supposed to manage a barrier protecting the kingdom from the Reign of Death, the force causing the blight in the first game. However, Gilroy became corrupted, and instead of solely protecting his people from the Reign of Death, He also began manufacturing more corrupt homunculi for his bidding. Gilroy's role in maintaining the barrier's operations came at the cost of his suffering, corruption, and in all the time he's been doing it, the barrier itself. So you find out that you need to kill Gilroy and replace his role with your main summon to make sure the barrier can stay functioning. This ending essentially sacrifices your main summon, Magnolia, only to not actually stop the corruption. You see, there's still corruption coming from the inside of the barrier from the magic harness to make homunculi. In Ending B, however, you're able to meet more people and figure out that not only can Magnolia maintain the barrier, like Gilroy, but she can also destroy it by using a modified relic from the first game's good ending. Destroying the barrier gives off enough energy to dispel blight from both the Reign of Death and inside the barrier, but at the cost of homunculi and the main character's life over time. Magic would be gone from the land, but at least society can carry on, at least until the inevitable third game. So, yeah, the story's alright. It's not completely original, but at least it's not a Hollow Knight reskin like the original somewhat is. Also to note, I may have messed some of the summary up, or just left out crucial details. I did pay a little less attention to the story than the first game, but I still enjoyed the game. I've said a few times on the channel, I'm more of a gameplay first type of guy, and, well, the game's fun. But yeah, sorry for any lackluster summary, you can definitely find a better one somewhere else if you so desire. The day I started writing the script, Ender Magnolia got its 1.1.0 update, or as I'm going to call it, the replayability update. Similar to Ender Lilies, this update came just under 2 months after the game was released, and includes New Game Plus, the ability to refight bosses as you progress, and a boss rush mode for when you finish the game. The update also fixed a small unvoiced complaint and added sets for equipment, relics, and abilities. These sets can only be switched and modified at benches, but it does make messing with new builds and switching a lot more efficient. If you want to play the game again, New Game Plus offers a higher difficulty, more aggressive boss patterns, and another upgrade level to relics to raise the difficulty scaling ceiling. Although I only attempted boss rush once, I look forward to trying it again if and when I play through the game again. I have a lot on my backlog, but I did enjoy the game enough to come back. Just like its predecessor, I strongly recommend Ender Magnolia if you're into Metroidvanias. The game may not have as many purely unique summons, but to a large extent Ender Magnolia is just better. The original has a charm to it, and I still like it. This one is consistently more enjoyable due to many quality of life changes. I'm curious about what you guys think, either from just having heard about the game, or maybe you've played it. I feel like both of these games hold up well, and are a quality experience holistically. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe, you know the drill. I have plans for my next few videos, and I'm continuing to cook up some content, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, later days.